One thing you may not realize is how much information is out there in plain sight to help you better understand what your kids are being taught in school. It's out there publicly, and I say in plain sight because no attempt is being made to hide it from you, but that doesn't mean it's being put front and center so you can easily find it or that anyone is alerting you to its existence. If you are not on the inside as an administrator or a member of a PTA or just a super involved parent or a teacher, you might not know that your state has a law mandating that your child learn certain things that run counter to your values or your, views. So part of my job on this channel is to make you aware that these things exist so you can go looking for them in your own state. Sometimes I will bring you an example from a given state. It's not your state, but the point of that is for you to go look at your state and say, I wonder if we have anything like this. I better go to the State Board of Education, type in these keywords and see what comes up. And I better look and see if there are videos or examples of a curriculum or state standards that are similar to what this state has that I don't like, or maybe that you do like, who knows? I'm going to go find out, because otherwise you're relying on what somebody else discovered or what you heard in a school board meeting, or, you're going to be 10 steps behind or possibly never know about something. And of course, the school will be able to say, well, it was always there. And that makes you, the parent, look pretty bad, doesn't it? I realize you're busy, and I realize that this isn't your full-time job to research what your school is doing. And you would like to believe it's not so very complicated to teach your kids how to read, write, do math, understand science, and, kind of get through the day. But it has been made very complicated because this is our government after all. And you really do need to dig in. It can be a second full-time job to know what's going on in your kids' classrooms, especially because they won't let you in the building anymore. So with that said, I want to bring you a video from New Jersey called Addressing Gender Identity in the K12 Curriculum and Supporting Transgender Students. I want to highlight key points from it. I'm not going to play the whole thing. It's an hour and a half long. I will just go to about maybe half a dozen or so places and listen to segments of this so you can see the key things you're going to want to ask of your own state, and also give you some of my opinions about it. But first, who is this organization? Because you might want to look at these organizations in your own state. It might not be available off the Board of Education website unless it is a mandatory curriculum. If it's a mandatory curriculum, you might find it in the state standards, but you won't necessarily find examples or find things like this unless you find out about the organizations that support administrators and teachers in your state. So you might have to go looking for this equivalent in your state. You might have to go looking for, the State School Board Association or the State Teachers Association or whatever it is locally to find these materials. So what is the NJPSA? This is the New Jersey Principals and Supervisors Association. And the FEA, which is also part of this, is the Foundation for Educational Administration. So the point is that this is a presentation to administrators by an organization that serves administrators, not even teachers. This serves administrators so they can work with the teachers they've hired and they supervise and so forth. And even some of the scenarios presented in this presentation help the administrators work with those teachers because they're anticipating that teachers may not agree with what's going on, or teachers may have a tough time with what's being asked of them. So you're going to hear from people who are digesting the law, New Jersey statute. You're going to hear from somebody who helped write the curriculum that's now mandatory. And then you're going to hear a couple of answers to a couple of questions during Q&A sections that I think are relevant for you to hear. And before we get started, I would like to ask you to have a couple of questions in your mind as you're listening. First, what is the role of the school as far as teaching values and beliefs when it comes to things that are not, strictly speaking, scientifically defined? You will hear in this presentation a couple of times they refer to factual information. I dispute that. You should know going in, I dispute the point of view that they take in New Jersey, which is the wrong body point of view. The point of view that your gender identity can be whatever the heck you want it to be, that it may differ from the gender you were, quote, assigned at birth, that gender has nothing to do with your biology, and that you can even use these terms with very, very young children, that they argue that children as young as 3, 4, and 5 have what they call a deep sense of what their gender is. I dispute that. Now, I'm not a gender scientist or a scientist of any kind. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a parent and I'm a former teacher, and I've worked around a lot of kids, and it is my opinion, my considered opinion after lots and lots of thought and reading a lot of material from evolutionary biologists, that this is a theory they have that is unsupported by scientific fact. There is no wrong body concept, that 3, 4, and 5-year-olds do not have a sense of a feeling of what it is to be a boy or a girl, and that this entire ideology that is built upon that theory is false because of its foundation being false. It is not grounded in fact. It is not grounded in science. That is my argument. I know there are people who disagree with me, but you should know going in, that is my point of view. If you share that point of view, you might share my opinion on this curriculum. The next thing that you should know going in is that I feel very strongly that schools should not be proactively teaching this stuff to very young children. I actually don't think they should be proactively teaching it at all. Meaning, I don't think they should be approaching students who are impressionable minors and putting doubt in their mind about what their gender identity is. That is a very different thing than supporting someone who has a strong view on what their gender identity is, coming to the school and saying, please support me, or I'm not getting support at home, or I'm not getting support within the school and I'm getting harassed. Very different thing. I don't think we need to validate and celebrate something or propagate it as an idea in order to support someone. I can love somebody without agreeing with them. I can support them without having every other person in the entire building believe that what they're going through is some general organic thing that anyone can be going through. I think that's actually very dangerous with young children. And so you should know going in that I just disagree with the point of view of all of these people on this presentation. That does not mean I think they're ill-intentioned, although I have some questions about some of them. I think they're wrong. I just think they're wrong. I think their good intentions really don't matter if I think they're wrong, and if I don't think they should be doing what they're doing as far as usurping parental rights when it comes to whether or not children should be, or parents and children should be allowed to opt out of certain lessons. Some of the lessons I don't have a problem with in terms of I don't think they're harmful. I just think they send a message that isn't good. So, for example, the requirement in New Jersey is that they teach about the contributions of people who are LGBT, for example, and that they specifically do that they go and they find contributions and they teach these kids about that must be covered because the student needs to see people who are like them. First of all, I disagree with that. I don't think we need to see people who look like us or act like us or think like us or feel like us in order to have self-esteem. I think the idea that external validation is necessary to feel good about ourselves is pernicious, and it's one we should be trying to overcome in our teaching, not teach into our kids. Remember, what would you do if your friends jumped off a bridge? Would you go with them? Well, this is kind of like saying your friends are about to jump off a bridge, maybe you should consider it. And you might think, well, are you equating, being trans with jumping off a bridge? It might be. For a given student, it very well might be if they're not doing it for the right reasons. So instead of looking for external validation, maybe that student should be talked to, et cetera. And that's not to say don't teach about Alan Turing. That's not to say don't teach about somebody who has made a significant contribution just because they're gay or trans. Of course not. I'm saying it is un-American to go cherry picking people out of a lineup based on what they look like or what identity they had to teach them so that we have, like representatives of all these groups. That's just not what America's about. We should celebrate all people who make contributions, regardless of what their identity was. It should be based on merit. It should be based on the quality of their contribution and the time we have to cover contributions in the first place. We don't have unlimited time in class to cover the contributions of other people. So looking around to pick people out based on their gender or identity or their sexual orientation strikes me as essentialist, which is something I'm against. It promotes a sense of group identity as more important than individual identity, and I just dispute that. I think that also has negative implications down the line. So that you understand where I'm coming from, and it has nothing to do with me being hostile to this community or hostile to individuals within this community. Absolutely not. I think we can support individual students. I think we can defend their, their humanity. I think we can teach decency and respect without necessarily arranging ourselves around people and around people's feelings such that the majority of the students are made to feel that they are somehow an inherent threat to their fellow students just by their existence. And that's kind of what comes across to me in this presentation. But let's get started with some of this. Okay, the first place I'm going to go to is, let's see, at about 25 minutes or so, where they are talking about, let's see if I can get there first of all. And they are talking about the legal standards and, the legal questions. I want to get to the right place for you. Okay, here we go.
Folks have been doing a great job putting some questions into the chat. So the very first one, can a student's preferred name and pronouns be changed on all school databases and digital platforms without parental consent?
So the answer is yes, the name and pronouns can be changed without parental consent. The New Jersey Department of Ed guidance makes that clear. I will say, however, that the one thing we don't want to do is be the one accidentally outing a student to their parents. So if a parent is unaware of their child's gender identity or expression, you wouldn't want to change the formal records at that point and have that be the way that you're now outing the student to their parent. But you do not need parental consent to make the changes in records. If the child is telling you who they are, wishes to have the records changed, they need to be changed.
All right, let's do just one more. Is there guidance in regard to the age for when a student is able to decide on what their gender identity is?
Yes, a student at any age, in grades K through 12, has the ability to express who they are, and we need to honor that student's expression of gender identity or expression. Research tells us that many children have a sense of their gender identity at a very young age 3, 4, 5.
Research tells us. Whose research? Is that corroborated? Do we trust that research? Do you, mom and dad, want to go with that research? Do you believe that your 3-year-old has a sense of what gender they are? Do they even understand the concept? Is that what you want? They're talking about universal preschool, by the way. Not here, but the government wants universal preschool, which will be 3, 4, and 5. They have control of your children at 6 in most kindergartens. That's this gentleman's position. That's the law in New Jersey. Research tells us 3, 4, and 5.
Sometimes they have a difficult time explaining that to the adults in their lives, but oftentimes the student has a sense of their gender identity at a very young age.
My daughter told me yesterday when she was 7, she wanted to be a mermaid, like really badly wanted to be a mermaid, thought it might be possible. Then she read a lot of the Warriors books about cats and she wanted to be a cat, really wanted to be a cat. In fact, imagined herself a cat. My other daughter loved dragons so much from reading the books that she read about Wings of Fire that she started to believe that she was a dragon and that she was just assuming human form. But she's so identified with the characters in the book she was reading that she felt she was a dragon. And that was at age 7. Mermaid, dragon, cat, gender different than what you're born. Because do you really know what it feels like to be a girl or feels like to be a boy if you weren't born one? What does that even mean? What are we talking about here? Are we talking about somebody who's attracted to the gender stereotypical clothing and behaviors and mannerisms and hobbies and so forth that society tells us go with that gender? Or is there some kind of intrinsic way to be a girl or be a boy or feel like you're a girl or feel like you're a boy when you're 6? This is one of those views that I just disagree with. I just don't think that a 6-year-old has a feeling of what gender they are.
So we do honor this request for students at all ages. Now, you do have the right to take the time to sit down and have a conversation with that student. One of the things that you want to
do you want the teacher doing that? Do you want that to be the person? So your 6-year-old is asked in class, because this is really how it will go on. There'll be a lesson about gender identity. There's even a scenario later in the video, and I'll put this link down below. You can watch the whole thing for yourself. There is a scenario where there's a 2nd grade lesson about gender identity. So proactively teaching 7-year-olds about this. And now the idea is put in their head. And they might say, oh, yeah, well, I feel like I'm a boy today, or I want to be a boy. Do you want the teacher to be the one having this in-depth conversation with your child, or would you prefer that be brought to your attention? So today we were doing gender identity lesson in class, and your child said that they would like to be a boy. I mean, you know, treating the parent like they're always an abuser or always a potential abuser, and they're only going to do something bad with that information because their 7-year-old said it, is what seems to be the operating principle here. Well, you have every right, teacher, principal, administrator, to sit down with a student and have an in-depth conversation with someone else's 7-year-old. Is that what you want for your child? I sure wouldn't. I would be absolutely mortified if someone who's essentially a stranger to me hears my child say, yeah, I'm a boy today, or I want to be a boy. I feel like a boy. And if that was the person to sit down and hash that out with them.
think about, is the student persistent, consistent, and insistent?
Persistent, consistent, and insistent. Yeah, again, my daughter was persistent, consistent, and insistent that she was a dragon. And she was 7. Those 3 words, they sound so meaningful, but how many people have had elementary school kids be persistent, consistent, and insistent about a whole lot of things? I'm not hungry. I'm not cold. I am cold. I am hungry. So, I mean, they do those things all the time.
Regarding who they are and their gender identity. So when you sit down and have that private conversation.
And it's a private conversation that your child is having with an adult, not you, and you'll never know about it.
You want to make sure that the student is truly expressing this is their gender identity, and then you honor it.
And then you honor it. You make sure, because you're qualified apparently to do that, Ms. Principal, Mr. Principal, teacher, whoever this administrator person or other person than you, parent, you make sure. We don't know what the objective standard of making sure is, other than the persistent, insistent, stuff. But, and then you honor it, and then you just honor it. There's no involvement of the parent whatsoever. You might find out that back at home, the kid just watched, something on TV and they fell in love with the character, and so they want to be that character. It is extremely common for boys in particular, because their mother tends to be their primary caregiver, to want to, it's normal for kids to dress up like their primary caregiver, but want to wear mom's jewelry, want to wear mom's makeup, want to wear mom's clothes. It does not mean anything. It does not mean they identify as a female. It absolutely does not mean that. Story we love to tell in our family is about my nephew, now a grown man, very much a man, very much hetero, very much cis. When he was about, I want to say like 5, maybe 6, they went to see The Wizard of Oz on Broadway. And in the concession stand, they were selling ruby red slippers. And his first cousin, who was about the same age as a girl, she got the ruby red slippers. He wanted the ruby red slippers too. So they bought the ruby red slippers for my nephew. He took them home and he wore them everywhere. You name it, was just running around in them constantly. Also wanted to wear my sister's jewelry, etc. and so forth. They're wearing the ruby red slippers, She started to get a little concerned. So she called the pediatrician and she said, Should I be concerned about this? He wants to wear these little heels with their ruby red slippers like everywhere he goes. And the pediatrician sort of chuckled and said, no, it's completely normal. Little boys do this all the time. They, first of all, he wants to be like his cousin. He wants to be like you. He wants to be like the character that he admired in the show. He doesn't really understand the difference. Like, what difference would it make, right? So let him wear them. If he's still doing it at 10, call me. We'll have a talk. 10. So he wore these shoes for another, I don't know, a few more days. And then all of a sudden she found the shoes. My sister found the shoes in the trash can. And she said, what's going on with the shoes? What happened to the ruby red slippers? He says, oh, I can't ride my big wheel with them. There you go. They didn't work when he wanted to move on to a toy where he wanted to ride his big wheel around the neighborhood. They didn't work. So he took them off and threw them away. Didn't want them anymore. Just, that was a passing little fad. Now imagine if this kid had been validated or affirmed or told, well, that means you are a girl, or, you feel like a girl, therefore you really are a girl. Who knows? What's the protocol for that so-called private, in-depth conversation? We don't know. It's just going to be had by a stranger, not you. And you're never going to know it was had.
For a very young child. So with that, we know, of course, there could be many more questions.
And he chuckles like, oh, of course, many more questions. So let's move on. So that was, we've got to affirm, and it doesn't matter their age. So now I'm going to go to something a little farther along.
David, good morning, everybody. My name is Christian Fuscarino. I'm the executive director at Garden State Equality. And this slide that we're looking at right now is the terminology that is provided through the New Jersey DOE. As David said, language is constantly evolving. And so this is a really good place for you to see some terminology that you should be using right now, but understand that things may change over time, and that's okay.
The goalposts are going to move. Things may change. Language is constantly evolving, which is going to be even harder for you to keep up with. So again, these are the things I want you to evaluate. You're saying, well, I have to keep my kids in the schools. Okay, but you might just master this language and they'll change it. They reserve the right to change this. The language is evolving. Wasn't that nice? Objectivity out the window.
I've been doing this work for nearly 20 years at this point, and the terminology that we were using in the early 2000s is not the terminology we're using today with a lot of the items that are listed on this screen here. So it's important that you make yourself aware of these terms, especially around the ones that David has listed here. Gender identity means a person's internal sense of gender. So when you are talking with your students and they're saying my gender identity is, that's how you are to refer to them.
That's just it. Just whatever they say is how you're to refer to them. No questions asked. Nothing. Just that's what they say. You go with that.
What the policy says. You are within the law. I really appreciate what Karen said at the start of this panel discussion. And really, this is the heart work, right? So
heart work, he calls it. They got to make it all nice. Look at this definition. Gender identity means a person's internal, deeply held sense of gender. Do you think, again, that your 6-year-old has a deeply held sense of gender? Ponder that. All people have a gender identity, not just transgender people. For transgender people, the individual's internal gender identity is not the same as the gender assigned at birth. This is the wrong body mindset. This is the wrong body belief. Gender is assigned at birth. No, it's not. You are born, and that is what you are. You're a boy or you're a girl. You're male or you're female. Gender expression and gender. See, I can get on board with the way I express my gender is dramatically different from the way someone else might. It doesn't have to be stereotypical. That I can get on board with the external manifestations of gender, expressed through a person's name, pronouns, clothing, haircut, behavior, etc. Society identifies these cues as masculine. Fine. I can get on board with that. Okay? Dress how you want, name yourself what you want, have a haircut that you want, all those kinds of things. But your gender identity, just telling a child that they can just choose to be male or choose to be female, that's my internal, deeply held belief. And it doesn't matter what my sex organs are. We're going to part ways there. That has a name. Gender dysphoria. And it used to be classified as something you would want to talk to a doctor about because that might indicate that something else is going on. Intersex people are extraordinarily rare. People who are, either born with, indeterminate gender or sex, or people who legitimately have both and a decision has to be made. And then the pituitary gland and other hormones don't necessarily align with what decision was made at birth to actually choose physically one way or the other, and so forth and so on. That is extraordinarily rare. We're talking about people who are obviously defined. Their parents thought, looking at them, the doctors thought everything, this is a male, this is a female. And now they're saying, well, my deeply held inner sense is different than that. They're acting like that's the beginning, middle, and end of it. That's it. There's nothing else to discuss. There's no other work to be done. There's no other conversations with a professional to be had. The child makes that determination, and then all the adults around the child who don't love them, don't know anything about what else is going on in their life, what other challenges they're facing, they just affirm it. Let's move on. That's fait accompli. It's all done.
We have a wonderful transgender student policy. We have the inclusive curriculum law. We have the other curriculum law that the
inclusive curriculum law. I want to stop and show you what that entails. The inclusive curriculum law means that they are going to use this LGBTQ inclusive lessons and resources. Okay. And what you should know is that they have to include them. They have to include them in all of the curriculum areas. So when we look at this curriculum, you see how it says how to use these plans and so forth. There are lesson plans by subject: English, math, science, social studies, visual performing arts, world language. They have research, you can go read this for yourself and decide what you think about it. But the thing that's important to recognize is that they absolutely believe that you have to include this in every single area, So they have all kinds of lesson plans, and the teacher would come in here and teach these lesson plans. Grade 2, grade 11 and 12, grade 10, 11, grade 10, 9, 6, 7, 8, etc. All right. So this is what he's talking about, and it is mandatory. This curriculum that is built on the premise that representation is what kids need. They need to see themselves represented in the curriculum. Apparently all students need to. In other words, if you are one of those students, you can't have self-esteem unless you see yourself in the curriculum, and you can't respect and treat other people with dignity if you don't see them in the curriculum. That's the only way we can possibly teach tolerance. Somehow we managed to get to gay marriage as, the national standard, legal in every state in this country by law. Somehow we got there without this kind of curriculum, that we've gotten to the point where it's just completely taboo to be homophobic. Everybody's transphobic if you don't validate everything about a trans person, including that they should, a trans female should occupy biological female spaces like sports. That makes you phobic. We've gotten here without this curriculum, but now we need this curriculum. You decide. He's talking about overnight field trips and policies around that and why you would separate them. Okay. So listen closely to what he says.
Originally, to make sure that they weren't going to be sleeping with one another and to protect the students individually. But that concept doesn't work when people are LGBT, right? Or LGB. And so like the original reasoning for that to happen is false today.
So is he actually admitting that when you put gay men and women with people of the same gender, they're just going to want to have sex with them? Because we were told, at least I was told all along, that, don't assume that just because somebody is same-sex attracted doesn't mean that you are in danger of, being sexually approached by them just because they're in the same space as you. Because we've been going to locker rooms for a long time. Women have, both in school and as adults, with people who are presumed to be lesbians and walking around without our clothes on. And, I don't think people were really afraid of being overpowered and attacked and so forth by somebody else of the same sex, or even going on a field trip and having some girl make a pass at you because you were, sleeping in the same dormitory or whatever. This almost acts like, well, that doesn't apply anymore because they're going to sleep with each other. Like, that's all they're doing is having sex all the time. I thought the whole point of who you're sexually attracted to is not that that it doesn't count anymore, that we worry about these things, but that, you want to be with the gender that you are for physical safety. So females who are lesbian being with females who are straight, it's not because you wouldn't be worried about it that, oh, they're going to make a pass at my daughter. It's more like, well, I'm less concerned that they might physically overpower my daughter and rape them. And you're definitely not concerned about pregnancy, are you? But if we just throw it all out the window and it's like, it doesn't really count because they can be sleeping with each other anyway. So these things don't apply. It's all outdated. Well, now you're telling biological females they have no reason to be concerned about people who might be bigger, stronger, and much more capable of overpowering them as they're asleep at night in a room with their classmate. But you're also negating the very real biological reality that they could get pregnant from such an encounter. Have we learned nothing from Loudoun County and what happened with the boy with the skirt who went in the bathroom? And we know that there are rapes and pregnancies now in prisons because of allowing these people in the spaces. There are still concerns. They're just different concerns. And he's kind of flippant about it.
Valid, right? Like you will have, you may have boys sleeping with boys and girls sleeping with boys. And you would, and girls sleeping with girls. And so this construct of separating students by gender just doesn't hold up to.
It's not a construct. It was a very specific, policy meant to avoid rape and pregnancy, aggressive rape and pregnancy. That's what it was for. It was to help maintain the innocence of these people and their physical safety. That doesn't go away. That hasn't been eliminated. You're putting a lot of trust on these kids to not have ulterior motives and just acting like just because there are gay males and females and just because they might be in the same space as people they might want to have sex with, that we just throw everything out. It doesn't matter anymore. So like I said, what is it? Are we now admitting that people who are homosexual are promiscuous? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying that these kids just are going to have sex no matter what we do? Are you ignoring pregnancy? Like, what are you saying?
Today's society. And I don't know if this was one of the stats that was shared earlier with the Trevor Project, but there are stats out there about how young people are identifying, and more young people are identifying or exploring different sexual identities. And
do you hear that? More and more people, more and more kids are exploring. More and more kids. Do you want them exploring with your child? Do you want them exploring on a field trip or an overnight? He's acting like, well, this is all just so normal and wonderful, and they're more and more exploring, and what kind of sexual identity they want to have, and these antiquated ideas of separating them by gender in an overnight trip. I mean,
So, especially at the time that they're in, senior year of high school.
Senior, really, sir? Try 6th grade. Look, I'm older than you are, and kids are starting to explore their sexuality in 6th grade. Okay? We know that. That's why there's sex ed. That's why we were told for so many years that sex ed was necessary, because don't you want to prevent teen pregnancies, don't you? You want to make sure they're protected from STDs, don't you? We must start teaching them at 10 and 11 years old. And in fact, they're starting to teach things at 10 and 11 years old here too. But don't act like it's only seniors in high school. Please. It's insulting to our intelligence.
They're going to be wondering, do I like boys? Do I like girls?
With what you're teaching them, they're going to be wondering that a lot sooner.
I like, gender non-binary people, and who am I interested in? And so these constructs just don't work for that mind.
These constructs. Everything's a construct. They don't work. And the kids are going to be wondering all these things. And if they are, should it be the school helping them explore this stuff? Or should it be you? Is this what school is for? Is this what you send your kids to school to learn? Do you and your child have a responsibility to other people's children to help them explore these things?
Said they're outdated.
They're outdated. Oh, sorry. Your values are outdated. Just thought you ought to know. You might want to check with your state and see if they think that your ideas are outdated. So let's move on to the next wonderful tidbit of information.
Right, let's tackle one or two of the other ones that lingered from before, because maybe we'll be able to get some of these done by the end of the session. Can you explain a little more on how to keep separate records for the student's birth name and gender identity, name, and pronoun? Do we always do this? For example, if parents and guardians are not aware, where and how do you keep these records? The administration's office versus the counselor's office? Any concrete recommendations, either from David or even from some of our principals on the call?
So as a legal matter, there is a requirement to keep a separate record that has the student's originally designated gender identity and name. I would be interested to hear from some of our other practitioners how you're logistically doing that, but we are required to do that.
Did you hear that? They're required to keep separate files. And his major concern is, how are you doing that logistically? And then they go into, and you can go watch it for yourself, they go into a discussion of how they're going to pressure the software company into changing things around, because right now it's just too cumbersome for them maintaining these two files, and the way that they view them is just not really helpful. And they need to, the main thing is they want to make sure they don't out the kid to their parents accidentally or to anybody else. They've got to keep these two separate files where the one is always secret. So, you might want to check out, again, what your state's policy is about maintaining separate records.
And David, can I jump in on this? Another component is I try to normalize the experience. So if you think about this from another protected class, you wouldn't notify parents that a student from the Latinx community was
Latinx community. By the way, they hate being called that. They hate the erasure of genders from their language. You want to talk about cultural appropriation or colonizing a culture. This is a classic example where, in the name of gender identity and gender theory and gender ideology, they have just trampled over an entire culture. And they act like they're doing something good. And she's actually comparing being transgender or identifying as a different gender today, because remember, they can be gender fluid, with being someone who's Hispanic. Latino, Latina. That is utterly ridiculous. That is utterly ridiculous.
Changing in your child's changing room, that you would never even think to do that.
Of course, you wouldn't think to do that, because the notion that a biological female would be, in any kind of danger from somebody who's from a different ethnic background is obviously ridiculous. But there is a very real concern that a biological female might be in danger from a biological male who is bigger and stronger. Again, how did we go from Me Too and Believe All Women and, safe spaces and all these things? Suddenly it's like, nope, doesn't matter if he's got 25% more upper body strength than you and has a foot of height on you and all kinds of other strength on you. Nope, he feels like a girl today, so you're going to have to tolerate him being in the showers with you.
So as we are normalizing our understanding of gender as a social construct,
as we are normalizing our understanding of gender as a social construct. Well, you may be normalizing that, but many of us parents are not. And so then as this goes on, they get to some key takeaways. It's the last thing I'm going to show you, because it just gets, high quality curriculum requires diverse content reflective of the population and the world. I would dispute that. I think that's a debate we need to have. I don't think that's a foregone conclusion. Open lines of communication, transparency essential at all levels, except with the parents. They're obviously not going to be transparent, so they're kind of lying. Dare to be brave. It's not very brave if you refuse to address the fact that parents might know better than you. And it's critical to rely on and partner with experts in the field other than parents, apparently. Parents, you're not included as experts in your child's life. Common language and common messaging is vital so that everyone says and hears the same thing, no matter the source. So they're very keen on talking points. And so, in fact, I'm going to show you the talking points they're going to use. When confronted on an issue without having all the information, they have a talking point. Thank you for bringing this issue to my attention. I want to make sure I have all the information necessary. They may have the information. This is how they put you off. When accused of promoting a political agenda or ideology, please know that I am committed to making sure we implement the state instructional requirements without any political ideology. This is a political ideology. Not everyone agrees with this. There's politics behind this. This isn't fact. These are opinions. Everything to do with gender ideology is ideology. And there's politics behind it. So you implementing the state law doesn't negate that. Just because New Jersey passed a law doesn't mean they're not implementing a political ideology. When challenged about whether concepts of gender identity should be taught at the elementary level, our curriculum is consistent with state law. I was just following orders. That doesn't answer the question. And then it says, and includes well-vetted and factual information. No, this is not factual information. 6-year-olds do not have a deeply held belief about their gender. That address issues of gender identity in an age-appropriate manner. No, what if we disagree that you should be addressing it at all at the elementary level? What if we think the entire elementary level is inappropriate to discuss gender identity? I am happy to review those and get back to you, meaning suck it up, buttercup, this is how it is. So they have talking points. Here's more talking points. When a parent requests to have their child opt out of the curriculum, as with many other aspects of state-mandated curriculum, the New Jersey legislature has not provided an option to opt out. That's a very long way to say no. Rest assured that we are implementing this curriculum in a way that is consistent with state law. Again, I as a parent could give 2 shits about whether it's consistent with state law. I want to know why I don't have the right to opt my kid out of something that I disagree with when I'm paying taxes for it. That addresses universal principles such as respect and dignity for all. You don't need to do that by teaching my kid to have doubt in their gender. And does not promote any political ideology. This does. Stop saying it doesn't. It does. If you have specific questions about aspects of the curriculum, I'm happy to review those concerns and get back to you. They're not happy. That's a lie. They don't want to have this conversation, as the whole rest of the paragraph says. When parents indicate it is their job to teach their child about sexual issues, they're right. Period. That's it. They're right. Except no, listen to their answer. School districts are the appropriate forum, not an appropriate forum, the appropriate forum to convey through the curriculum factual information, again, not factual, regarding issues such as gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation, and the need to understand and be supportive of our diverse student population. Again, the need to be supportive of the diverse student population would be something you would do in response to the population manifesting, not going proactively and saying, are you this? Are you that? You might be, you don't know. Maybe it could be this. Hi, 6-year-old. No, that is a very different thing. And again, you can be loving and supportive without having to validate and approve of and accept the values of, etc. No, you don't have to do that. And this is not factual information. All of this is opinion. All of this is opinion, including and right up to the opinion of the person declaring their gender. This includes addressing in the curriculum the political, economic, and social contributions of LGBTQ persons. So they're just saying that somehow that's connected to supporting the diverse population. They can't be supported unless we show them these contributions constantly. That assumes that nobody was ever motivated by seeing, the first of anyone, or never thought they would be the first. How did that ever occur? How did somebody decide to go advocate for gay marriage unless they saw somebody who previously advocated for something? I mean, people fight for what they believe in without seeing an example of someone who did it before. People are successful without seeing an example of someone who did it before, who looks exactly like them. They just need to see that it's possible by someone. Given the increased risk of serious and lasting social, emotional, and physical harm for transgender students, how about the existence and the increased risk of serious, lasting social and emotional harm to all the non-transgender students of doing this? To the girls having to share bathrooms with biological males who might exploit this policy? No, we don't care about them. That doesn't matter. We don't think about that. In fact, the fact that I just asked that question makes me a bigot, apparently. So, that's that's basically what they have to say about that. And then it goes on and, blah, blah, blah. And we're also happy to tell you all these things. So be aware that these things are happening in your school district, in your state, that many states mandate this kind of a curriculum. You should know what the curriculum's point of view is. Does it share the wrong body point of view? Does it affirm immediately even 6-year-olds? Or does it report home to parents? Does it involve a counselor with the parents? The missing piece for me in this is, let's say for the sake of argument, you are concerned about the parents rejecting the child. Wouldn't that be something a school counselor should get involved in, to bring the parent in and sit down and have a conversation jointly? Are you completely unconcerned that you're now not only encouraging the child to keep a secret from their parents, but you are carrying on that secret, making it harder and harder and harder over the years for that child to tell their parents the truth? They're going to have to tell them. They're going to find out. At some point, they're going to find out. How much harder is it going to be for their relationship with their parents, even if their parents otherwise would have loved and accepted them from the get-go? But how much more painful is it going to be that they were living a lie for years because you kept it from them, because you were the parent where they should have been? You're denying them the opportunity to love their child. You're denying them the opportunity to rise to the occasion. You're denying them the opportunity to change who they are, if that would be the appropriate course of action. You're just stealing reality from these parents. It's unconscionable. It's immoral. You shouldn't be doing it. You're not supporting this child by creating a rift between them and their parents, where one may not exist. To affirm and immediately keep secret is fundamentally wrong, and it should be illegal. But it's not. It's specifically mandated. In New Jersey, anyway. Go check your state. If you find this content helpful, if not disturbing, I hope you will consider liking the video, commenting on the video, sharing the video. Please support this channel any way you can. I will not be able to monetize this content because they will likely remove it due to its sensitive nature. So again, if you can support the channel or support my locals at thereasonwelearn.locals.com, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.